All right, I've been having some riveting conversations on Facebook that I want to share. So this first one, the question was, nowhere in any religion is slavery condemned or are women considered equal to men. And so I responded, well, I think there's a duality between men and women. Like we both have roles, but we can't create unless we're united. God is the only true creator. And that truth is reflected in Genesis if you look at it through a spiritual lens. I feel a lot is lost in translation, but if you look at the Hebrew meaning of the word Adam, there are layers to it. I feel like two equals in creation with different purposes. And a woman, as the carrier of life, is worthy of protecting, in my opinion. And as far as slavery goes, in my opinion, we're all slaves to something. I mean, physically, even, we have the honor of paying income taxes because we decide to be productive. And I mean, to me, that's slavery plus one. And I'm not justifying it, but I'm saying it's an objective truth to life. But so to me, rather than be a slave to governments or men or money and materials, I'll be a willing follower of God. And if I'm pursuing Jesus and loving one another as I was commanded, then my faith should reflect in my actions that I don't own people or treat anyone, any living thing, cruelly. And don't get me wrong, I'm a hunter and a meat eater, and we were given dominion over the earth, but to be good stewards, not to be piles of garbage. But there's a difference between having respect for something and then being cruel about it. And to me, it's a relationship with God, not a religion. It's humans' wickedness and evil who corrupted God's image. Okay, and then this gentleman replies, what a convoluted concept of slavery. Chattel slavery, as described in Leviticus 25:44 through 46, is nothing like having to pay taxes. And women were the property of the man. Marriage was a financial transaction between the father and the husband. Every slavery within the Israelite community that was temporary for the men was not for women. And then he says, I know you have to look at scripture through quotation spiritual lenses to justify the injustice, cruelty, and barbarism in scripture, but that's not spiritual lenses, that's blindfolds. And so then I reply, okay, I feel you're missing God making regulation for the approval of corruption. God didn't create slavery, humans did. When we decided to live in our image and not God's image. And that's my main point right there, right? And the tree of knowledge that we ate off of, that was us deciding to go in our image and not God's image. But if you look at the times, or what they tell us of the times, was like everyone in the world ran off slavery. So where I see God putting regulations on a corrupted human system that already existed, meeting them where they were at the time and showing them a way out of it, you see godlessness in what I would call the wickedness of man. But yeah, if you take the scripture by itself, I can see what you're saying. But if you look at the whole picture of it, it shines a different light on it, in my opinion. And I mean, you can say that's a convoluted concept, but either way, they're stealing life. I look at it as in today's society, money is time, effort, sweat, blood, and tears. But what do I know, right? I got my blindfolds on. I don't conflate God's image with human corruption, though. And then I tell him, thank you for your reply. I will think on it more. And definition does not equate justification. And then I would also ask the question, if God created slavery, then why did he give us free will? That says to me, it's humans trying to live in our image and not in God's image. And meanwhile, they're laughing at me the whole time, which is fine. I don't care. I pray for them. I find it sad that they find the truth humorous. And then he replies, or I got another person replying to me now. So then this is another person who doesn't agree with me. And he's saying, no one is saying God created slavery, which is what they said. But he's claiming God never condemned slavery in the Old or New Testament. Instead, he sanctioned slavery. He says where to get slaves, how to beat your slaves, which slaves are permitted, how to hand them down to your children. In the New Testament says, slaves, obey even your ruthless masters. But it also says, do not return a slave to a wicked master. It says a lot of things, but it's easy to take the Bible out of context. But then he's saying, respectively, my issue, Richard, is this is the same omniscient God who commanded his children not to whittle images or wear mixed fabrics or eat shellfish, but he couldn't command them to not own slaves. But he did. He said, love your neighbor. He didn't say own your neighbor. And so now he's saying, you're saying this omnipotent God was confined by the culture of the time. Could he not prevent the economy from collapsing without slavery? ? Read Matthew 6:25-34 again. Take no thought for tomorrow, for food, for clothes, because God will provide. This is a God who never condemned slavery. And that's talking about the apostles before they left. God told them, take no thought for tomorrow, for food nor clothes, because God will provide. And so then he says, and consider this, if you believe God allows evil because of free will, then what do you do with Isaiah 45:7, where God plainly says he created evil? And God does say he's the creator of everything, peace and calamity. He says all of that, and he admits it. And so then he asks me, if I believe the serpent in the garden was Satan, then how did man bring evil into the world if Satan himself was already there before the fall? Either way, man had nothing to do with it. So then I reply, that's fair in the sense that God did create everything and God owns it. He admits it. He does condemn slavery, and it is in the commandments where he says, love thy neighbor. That's condemn. He's not saying own your neighbor or control your neighbor. He's saying love thy neighbor. And to me, it goes back to God working with man the way they are, God working with man the way they are. And that's God trying to come to the table to be understanding. He also wiped out the whole planet because it was so wicked. So in that sense, he's condemning all of wickedness. And he cast Satan out of heaven for disobedience, just as we got cast out of the garden for disobedience, for wanting to live in our image and not God's image. And so again, it goes back to we are no longer trying to live in God's image, but our own image. And yes, God created everything, and he also gave us a way to come back to his image. But it requires us to make a choice to do that. So yeah, we can blame everything that has ever happened in creation on God. It's his fault. He even says it. But it's not in his image. Creation is his fault. And he owns it. That's why he's given us a way back to him. Salvation in Jesus. But we can't conflate God providing us a way to come back to his image as when we're putting our image is what we're creating on the earth and not God's image. And we can't conflate the two. That us not living in God's image, it's self-explanatory if you ask me, but we live in our image, not God's image, and God is giving us a way back to his image. But yet we want to blame everything on God, even though it's us who have created it by not living in God's image. So, yeah, that was an excellent conversation, and I appreciate all the gentlemen involved for their perspective. All right, thanks for listening. God bless. Much love. Shalom.